guys, welcome to SOFTalk. I would like to go ahead and content warning, Naruto spoilers.
Naruto spoilers for this episode of SOFTalk. Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to get into all the inspiration behind Azzurum and why there's a piece of every part of the Uchiha clan in him. Yeah, welcome to SOFTalk, the only podcast on the internet that talks about D&D, probably.
We haven't checked.
We haven't checked just yet, but I'm getting on that, so don't worry about it.
We have our team on it.
We got our legal team on it because we've made this claim too many times. Today we are doing the Azzurum Deep Dive, a good look into everyone's favorite warlock, Esen-Carr. Spoilers for SOFTalk, or no, it's just SOFTpod in general, that Azzurum is in fact a warlock. So if you didn't know that, then rough.
So you didn't see the introduction post for Azzurum where it says he's a warlock.
Yeah, and that's rough because he shouldn't be here. Though, thank you for if you're watching this early, thank you for the Patreon money.
If you're subscribed to our Patreon, either is fine. Okay. Well, if you're subscribed to that and you don't know who Azzurum is, thanks.
I know, you have so much faith in us.
You were like, this looks pretty cool.
They said, hold on here. I like that logo. I like that name. Don't know who this Azzurum fella is, but we're vibing. Kind of hot. All right, let's go for this. Thank you to all our patrons right now. If you're watching this early, that means you are a patron and you are experiencing the Azzurum Deep Dive before anybody else. We do ask that if you're watching this early, not to divulge too much information, because eventually this will be posted on the regular YouTube to everybody as well. So, just be cool about it, etc. But yeah, Kayla, how you doing?
How am I doing? I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk about my favorite blue boy.
Awesome. Very cool.
But other than that, I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
I feel like we need to do a SOFTalk Christian. I guess that was like the Afrad deep dive.
Just hanging out. Just going into my backstory in real life, which is very strange. But I guess that's a good question to start off, is why blue? I mean, what made you want to hinge your whole character on being blue? Because I'll be honest, I don't actually think blue is your favorite color. Blue
is not my favorite color. My favorite color is red, which is actually funny because like my backup character, their themes would probably be red and orange. But that's not Azzurum. So Azzurum, why is Azzurum blue? I don't remember. Because this is what my D&D journey was like. Christian was like, make a character. If you go on D&D Beyond, it will walk you through it. But I literally knew nothing about D&D, like at all. I also, unlike Michelle, I didn't really play World of Warcraft. I actually realized this with our party in general. I'm probably the least into like fantasy genre. Like I as a kid, I didn't really consume a lot of stuff that was high fantasy. So I'm not even really familiar with like a lot of the like common lore about like elves and stuff like that. And so I just saw the Genasi's and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. I'd be like it's like Avatar, I'd be like Airbender.
Yeah, true.
And the picture I think that they have for a Genasi on D&D Beyond is blue.
Yes, that makes sense, honestly. And small secret about me to kind of reassure you, I'm probably like the third most initiated in fantasy stuff, because like I literally didn't do high fantasy when I was younger, like all the way up. The only time I really started was when we started playing D&D.
Yeah, me too.
So like a lot of my stuff is not like, it's traditional high fantasy. I'm like, based off of this one anime I watched. I'm like it's inspired by like that sort of thing.
There are two types of people in our party. It's me and Christian and Christine and Michelle. And Christine and Michelle love high fantasy.
Yeah. But yeah. So kind of bouncing off of that, you see a blue character. You're like, all right. So airbending. This character's blue, so they're going to be blue. How then does it turn into Azzurum? What inspires you to like, okay, these are the building blocks I'm going to start with to see if this is the character I want to run for this?
With Azzurum, I created the character and a lot of his original clearly original personality traits, because a lot of them actually are not the Azzurum that we know today, based off of like the questions that were asked when I was creating the character. Like I asked in D&D Beyond like its alignment, and like there was something else about like there's like some like path or something you can take in D&D Beyond. There was a lot of things that like gave me like small ideas, because we also didn't know, we thought we originally were just playing a one shot.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think that deeply into it until a couple sessions in. I wrote my backstory last, I think, because everyone else was talking about their backstories, and I was like, I don't have a backstory. And when I wrote the backstory is whenever I think I developed Azzurum more into what he is today, which was just a character I wanted to play. I didn't think too much about it, of just like, I just wanted to play who would be my favorite character in something that I would watch.
That's a great way to do it. Yeah, just choose your favorite archetype and then just keep moving with it, because Azzurum is the epitome of that type of character. Very social, very kind of like in your face, but also lovable character.
And then I think as he's developed more, because for a while I had a dilemma that I thought Azzurum was just a fantasy version of me. But that's not true. And so more towards the second half of us playing through the pre-podcast stuff is whenever I started like registering, like, no, Azzurum would do this. And there are certain things about Azzurum's personality that are like almost purposefully the opposite. So like, I am not vegan. Azzurum is vegan. Azzurum's favorite animal is like cats. He loves cats.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite animal is dogs. Azzurum likes blue. I like red. And it's like small things like that help me remind myself that Azzurum is not just a projected version of myself. I will say some of his sense of humor is, though.
That's no problem. You have a good sense of humor. It does shine through into the game and catch me off guard a lot. There's been several times in which something you've said has just been like, if I'd be like mid-drink or something, I'd be like, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But yeah, no, I think that you did a great job of creating like a character that is literally has a life of his own and pushes forward into becoming his own character. And I could tell that like I think everyone had that fear of like, is this character just me with extra steps and blue skin? Like, what am I doing here? But no, I think everyone's done a pretty good job of like actually fleshing him out. Sort of pushing less from the background and more into the backstory of a character. I want to start with these, and then we're going to get into a bunch of audience questions. A lot of people want to know a lot of stuff about Azzurum, so I kept most of my questions kind of short just to give more of a framework. With Ladara, we had a lot of stuff already done in the pre-podcast. Like, we learned a lot about Ladara back then, so there's more to cover. Azzurum has not been approached in terms of like names from the past or places from the past or what even exactly happened. So it'll be a little bit more under wraps, if that makes sense. Let's start. So you, Azzurum, it's been revealed that you lived sort of a humble life growing up. It wasn't always daring adventure, and it wasn't always, warlock powers. Like, where does that start for Azzurum?
Azzurum, he grew up in a like blacksmith home. It was him and then his adoptive father, Elliot, and it was just the two of them. That was basically, he had to pull a lot of weight around the house, and he had to, he lived a pretty like straightforward childhood. Nothing too traumatic happened to him. He didn't know of his mother or his father at all, but he didn't really think much about it. Mm-hmm. He just kind of viewed Elliot as his father, and not really. It was actually kind of like an issue when he was growing up, because a lot of this kind of plays upon like my own personal experience, but a lot of Azzurum's early childhood was people being like, why are you blue? Like, who, like, you look a little different. And then like him going home to like Elliot and then being like, that dude's not blue. That's not your dad. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and so that's kind of how he always like viewed growing up, he just didn't really have a lot of thoughts in his head at all, and just would work in the blacksmith and clean up around the house and do some dumb shit like kids do.
It's very fair. We've had a couple sort of smaller flashbacks that allude to that sort of simple life. All in all, like, how did Azzurum feel about Elliot, like his father, if that makes sense?
He, like, I think viewed him as most kids would view like a healthy relationship with their father. Like, there was definitely his gripes he had as like an angsty 14-year-old, but overall it was he thinks now fondly back. Like, there's nothing that Elliot was really kind to him. He always took care of him. There was never really a lot of tension between them.
Did you, besides your father in the village, you mentioned that there's always like that question that was brought up by other people in the village or other children in the village. Did Azzurum have other friends that were in the village? Is there people that were there that he would have considered a friend?
He basically had one best friend growing up who was kind of like the yin to his yang, because that his friend was reasonable. A lot of his memories growing up were with his friend. But other than that, he actually didn't really have a lot of friends growing up. Not a lot of kids wanted to play with him. He's a little sad.
That is really sad. I'm so sorry. So you mentioned like this friend's reasonable. Does that mean that Azzurum was always kind of hot-headed or always kind of like rushes in?
Yeah, Azzurum has always been like kind of the Azzurum that you see today, a little more reckless and a lot less strong. And so he would be the kind of kid who would like come home with a bunch of scrapes all over his knees and stuff like that. Would like climb trees and break an arm.
Oh, God.
Or he was like the kind of kid that was like, let's go do this, and they're like, no, we're not gonna. And he's like, no, I think it'd be a pretty cool idea. And he always wanted to be like an adventurer. I think I mentioned that in the podcast as well. He always wanted to be an adventurer. So like anything that felt adventurous was like what he would try to do in his day-to-day.
So you live this very kind of happy life with your father, your friend, in a small village. And we won't get too into it because it hasn't been fully shown, but it's been alluded to, I think, around like episode 5 or so, that there is like an inciting incident that sets you on a journey of adventure. And there's this very clear divide between like life in the village, life on adventure, but it's not the kind of like go seek your destiny, go like happy
find the One Piece.
Yeah, go find One Piece, like stars in your eyes movement. Like what kind of journey would you say did Azzurum sort of start out on when he had to leave the village?
He definitely did not leave the village on good terms. It was definitely not time to set out on my journey and do some soul searching. It was kind of like, I guess I don't have anywhere else to go. I guess I should just leave, and I should go and pursue the idea of strength. And so he was like very like emotionally and physically lost for a couple of years after he left. And it's I always like kind of refer to it, I don't know if I've ever said it like on the podcast, maybe like on a tavern stage or something, of like Azzurum's emo phase. So basically from when he was like 17 to whenever the show started, which is 23, around like in that whole time, he just kind of was doing shady shit and hanging out with the wrong kinds of people and was exploring himself and his options in life. And so there was a lot of things and like paths that Azzurum took that were less than bright, but he made it through it.
Because Azzurum now like is like doesn't really shy away from the more like serious options, or like, you know, considering the more like the darker path, etc. Here and there. That kind of calls in question like Azzurum's motivation. Like you talked about pursuing this idea of strength. Would you say that that's his motivation for adventuring, or was that the initial and then has it changed?
I would say that initially, yes, he always was in pursuit of strength for multiple reasons, but it was always like this like idea that he was weak. He kind of always had this idea in the back of his head that you are weak. And so that's why he would try a lot of different things and get connections with a lot of different people, because he was like, anything to make me powerful. I would say that it's changed to an extent now, because now we've gotten to the point that Azzurum is pretty powerful. It doesn't really mean that he's not also still constantly pursuing some sort of like level up, some sort of like up like strength, but it's less he's less desperate about it, I guess. He's less like, I need this, you know. He's more likely to take a step back and be like, what is this going to get me into? But it's only because he's unfortunately signed himself up for a lot of other shit already. Yeah,
you definitely have a lot of monthly subscriptions going right now with Azzurum. No, yeah, and so that kind of plays into the next question a little bit, which I mentioned a little bit, that Azzurum's not one to shy away from at least considering an option, even if it seems like out of the realm of possibility for like Vincent or Renaer per se. But that calls into question with that motivation of, that motivation that will drive you to do what needs to be done or do necessary, like what you deem is necessary. That draws the question is, what is Azzurum willing to do? Like that sort of thing. You've demonstrated a couple times, and I won't get too into it because it's spoilers for later episodes. But Azzurum's demonstrated a couple times in both the brief podcast and the show that he's willing to go pretty far in order to accomplish his goals. Like where do you think that line ends for you as Azzurum?
I have no idea. The line is so far out of sight. When genuinely, he would consider just about everything, at least for a second. I'm trying to think like where would be I guess the hard line would be like endangering his friends, like anything like that's like, oh, you have to kill insert one of your friends or somebody who's close to you. I think that's probably where the line would be. But just about everything else on the table. At least a little bit. At least like
good to know.
I can't think of a single situation. There have been a couple times in game before the podcast and probably during the podcast where there's been an option presented to the party, and Azzurum's the only one who's like, what? Well, of course, yeah, we should just do it. Like, and then there's like, his moral code is a lot looser. He doesn't really have like a strong sense of morals sometimes.
It's all right. I mean, it's not to say that he's without morals. I mean, Azzurum does have a soft spot, obviously, for a number of characters, though whether it's openly shown or not shown is kind of depending on who it is. So kind of moving into what a lot of people want to hear about, which is taking that sort of survival mindset, that sort of, I would say almost like fairly independent, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like there is like a pretty independent streak in Azzurum, and now he's in a relationship which is fairly new, like it's just over the past few months, and then very recently like just turned into a long distance relationship. I mean, one is that Azzurum's first long-term relationship or first serious relationship, and two, how does Azzurum feel about having this kind of intense connection with a person?
Yes, it is Azzurum's first relationship really at all, that hasn't been like fleeting, that he actually like puts some sort of emotional stake into, Azzurum feels kind of like a little anxious all the time about it because he doesn't know how to be in a relationship. And Azzurum's pretty confident in about every other aspect of his life. But when it comes to being like emotionally vulnerable with one person and having that like connection, that in like such like a raw, deep connection with one person, it's a lot for him. Because even with like the party, though he has a very deep connection with them, and though he has been like vulnerable with them before, it's kind of like in small doses. But whenever you are in a relationship with someone, you kind of sign up for like your whole life, like to be shared with this person. And so the idea that his actions may have even deeper consequences, but then also the constant worry of something happening to this other person stresses him out a little bit. And then also because he doesn't really know how to be in relationships, he doesn't really know how to act, because he didn't grow up in a house with like a mom and a dad. There was never really like a prominent figure in his life that was ever in love. So he doesn't, and you know, he didn't watch like fantasy rom-coms.
He was a big fan of fantasy romance novels, fantasy fan fiction.
No, he wasn't keeping up with it.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I completely understand. And you've done a really good job of kind of portraying that relationship, even though it is literally through 3 sending spells every like few days, which, you know, is kind of just good representation of just like how busy you two are, especially with like the whole thing is Deville is over in Siniath building an organization from the ground up that has been fragmented, and then you all are well in a rough spot right now. And always are somewhat busy, so it's difficult to check in.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot, because every time I think like Azzurum would probably send Deville a message right about now, I think about the amount of stuff that has happened since the last time he sent him a message, and I'm like, I don't even know what to cover. Yeah.
No, I completely understand that. Let's jump over now, because like I said, there's all of that stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff to explore in Azzy's backstory, but it's also just not been touched upon, and will, or I'll say that it will. Yeah, it will come up again, so we can't really dive right into all of that. So I want to get into these questions because there are a lot of questions. We have them split between Discord and Patreon, so I'm going to start with the Patreon here first. This kind of touches back on what we were talking about with inspiration, and kind of something you said where Azzurum, as he started, is not Azzurum who is on the podcast today. This one's from Artemis, who asks, how did you initially see Azzurum, and how has his personality changed since then, or at least his motivations, flaws, etc.?
I originally saw Azzurum as and the core of a lot of these ideas are still there. I just kind of tweaked the execution. I originally saw Azzurum as a pretty cold character, as a pretty, like, I remember thinking like, oh, he doesn't speak unless like he needs to. His mindset, and the reason for that was because he has a lot of things he needs to do. He doesn't have time to like waste his time doing something else. I think on one of the first missions, his like first response is like, well, why would I do that? Like, I have things I need to do. And I think that Azzurum still has that mindset, but he also is just a really playful person. Like, he's a really playful character. And so as much as like he doesn't have time, and Azzurum will be the first one to be like, why are we doing this? There were a couple times that we've run into people that we've like decided to help or decided to like take them along with us, and Azzurum's always the one who's like, why are they here? We have shit we need to be doing. But he kind of does it in a more playful manner. He definitely talks a lot more than I thought that he would, and he's not cold really at all. So that was the biggest difference between now and then. Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Moving on. This one's from Venus. What is something that Azzy has just continuously done that at this point has just evolved into an Azzy thing? So basically like a habit that you may have unintentionally started doing, and now you're just like, it's just what Azzurum does. That sort of thing.
I'm not gonna lie, that's how a lot of his like characteristics kind of came about, especially some of the things that came from pre-podcast, like him being vegan was definitely just he's He's gonna. I think it was like we went somewhere and they asked like they were like making us food, and Azzurum was just trying. In my head, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be difficult and be like, oh yeah, also I'm vegan. Try to make fantasy vegan food. But then I like started thinking about it, and I was like, I think I actually like that as a character choice. And the name Azzy actually was a thing that was just kind of thrown in one day. It was something that Azzurum said to a kid that lived down the street from them in Seniath, and he said, you can call me Mr. Azzy, and you can call me Monster. He was like, you can call me Mr. Azzy, and I think that was the first time that anyone called him Azzy. And I think that was where that nickname came from. Azzurum's relationship with his cat. They just found a cat in their tavern, and he jokingly was like, I'm keeping it. But then I made it like a strong plot point that Azzurum actually really likes animals, and that also tied into his veganism.
Very nice. Like it all. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen those sort of points where it's like, okay, part of my character now. And I like that. That's cool. Next one's from Annie, who is asking if you can talk about a childhood memory that Azzurum still likes to think about. This one might be a difficult one to answer unless you have one in mind already.
Without getting too much into it, but people have asked before where Azzurum's piercings come from. And Azzurum and his childhood best friend mentioned earlier, every time Azzurum wanted to like do something dumb, or they bet on anything, like, oh, I bet this is gonna happen, or I'm gonna go do this and I bet I'm not gonna get caught. Every time Azzurum lost a bet, he had to get an ear piercing. That was their thing, was that they would be like, okay, we're gonna get ear piercings. By the end of their time doing this, Azzurum has, I don't know, however many you see on him.
Several piercings.
His friend has one on one ear.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's great. That's a great little character memory that makes a little too much sense. And the last one on Patreon here is a little bit more intense, which is, what is Azzurum most afraid of? Unless you mean like spiders or something, then it's a little less intense, but
Azzurum is afraid of everyone around him dying.
It is intense, it turns out. That is, yeah.
He's really, really scared of how his actions have consequences on other people. That's like probably the thing that, no pun intended, keeps him up at night. Besides the fact he doesn't need to sleep.
The actual thing that keeps him up at night.
But I think that's like always what he's worried about. If something happens and someone comes after him or comes after the party because of him, that's like the first thing on his mind is, well, had they not known me, this would have not happened to them.
Yeah, and that is kind of a underlying theme that I've kind of noticed, is that it is a lot of minuscule points that happened that all connect together into like something that is turned into something else, like some sort of consequence. So I definitely see how Azzurum's been playing toward that. Shifting on over to Discord here, back towards like an aesthetic point of view, which is Connor asking, what is, or at least what would you say Azzurum's aesthetic is? Like, what vibe does he give? What kind of core do you think he would be a part of?
So I'm going to warn you with this of, Christine helps me develop Azzurum's style a lot more. Like, I kind of send ideas to Christine, and Christine's like, what if he was wearing this, or X, Y, and Z? So I want to give a shout out to a lot of Azzurum's aesthetic to Christine's design. It wasn't like 100% me at all. And so, but if I were to say, what would Azzurum core be? Azzurum core would be like pretty simple clothes. Like, he doesn't wear a lot of flashy clothes. He just doesn't wear clothes. Like, in his time, like, his outfits are always like black and gray. There's never a lot of like jewels or like color on them. he wears a lot of accessories that are all also just like black or silver. And so it's like a basic, like what, I mean, it's like someone who looks like they grew up in a village and then discovered jewelry.
Very nice.
I don't know if that helps, but I'm not very good at describing visual things, but
it does make a lot of sense. And also, I struggle a lot I have an image in my head, but describing visually what it is, I'm like, I hope they can just get the vibe of what I'm saying and come up with a better visual description in their own head. Valerie asks basically what Azzurum's ideal day would be. I think we had that with Ladar as well. We've had this question in a few like soft talks before. But off the top of your head, can you remember, or at least do you know what Azzurum's perfect day would be like?
His perfect day would probably be probably hanging out with his friends and or DeVille in some aspect, probably going out and doing something. There was a time in the pre-podcast that he went out to like basically the fair that was going on, like the city fair. Something like that I think would be up Azzurum's alley. A day where he doesn't feel like he might get like assassinated.
Yeah.
And where he can just like kind of run around and laugh and have fun.
Yeah. I promise you will all get a nice day at some point soon.
We're like a day where he's not sad, you know?
A day where he doesn't have to think about the impending doom or danger. I completely understand. Our next question is from Raina, who asks, what is Azzurum's favorite thing about himself?
His looks.
They are really good.
Azzurum's really confident in his appearance.
He should be. He's right. It's one of those things that go, no, he's hot.
Of Christian last episode saying, it's kind of hot.
It's kind of hot. Temperature-wise. That was legitimately, I was like thinking about it. I'm like, it'd be really hot in a turtleneck right now. And I was like, well, yeah, it also is hot. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, he's probably most confident in his looks. Outside of his looks, his strength probably, but it's not like super confident in like his brain power.
That's all right.
It's got fucking marbles up there.
You can talk circles around most people.
Yeah, he can.
It's pretty big. It's a pretty big part of the group dynamic.
Yeah, I guess he's pretty good at people. He's pretty good at conversing, mostly just because he's conversed a lot. He's experienced a lot of different types of people in different situations.
That makes sense. Our next question here is from Issa, who is the first Discord person to dive into the DeVille topic. We talked a little bit about this before, but sort of how you feel about the relationship, but how do you think your relationship has developed with DeVille through like Azzurum's point of view?
Through Azzurum's point of view, I think DeVille has become like a stable, like a kind of like a pillar of strength for him, because a lot of other relationships that Azzurum has with the other party members and stuff like that, there's always this sense of Azzurum at the end of the day is trying to protect them, and like he needs to kind of keep it together so that he can protect them. But I think DeVille's one of the only people in his life where he feels like he can be like vulnerable and honest with him, because of he feels like DeVille's strong. DeVille can handle my trauma a little bit, but he's not gonna go like unload his trauma on Vincent.
Yeah, no, DeVille has time and time again saved you all, or at least given you all a sense of like he can handle a lot. I think from DeVille's point of view, there is a lot of nuanced feelings. I had the thought the other day where I'm like, I'm not gonna approach the elf age thing like currently at this moment, because that is wild, because in the real world it would be like the old man old man FaceTiming his young partner.
Sugar baby.
Sugar baby. He's like, Hi. How are you all doing in Weldon? Everything good? No. Don't. That image is very cursed in my head.
Incorrect. Don't use that.
Incorrect. Do not use it. Not canon. Not canon. Let's move a little bit further there. Next question from Kat. And they ask, what is his favorite food and favorite beverage? I have somewhere like a really detailed answer from you.
Yeah, that's still the correct answer. I don't remember exactly what I said, but whatever I said, every time you pull it up and read it, I'm like, yep, still tracks.
Oh my God. And let me see if I can find it so I can just finally have it recorded and that everyone will know. Azzurum's favorite dish, this is just a straight up dish, is fried thinly sliced tofu in sesame oil on top of fresh garden spring mix with carrots and grape tomatoes and Italian corn salsa on the side. Street corn with tomatoes with a little bit of parsley. And then you go in to say that for the drink, a black iced coffee in the morning, if it was at night, some alcohol, and during the day, a nice glass of water with a little bit of lemon.
Yeah, the food definitely tracks. I think the coffee and the water plays into whenever I used to play Azzurum a little more seriously. Azzurum totally drinks juice. He loves juice. Get that kid a sippy cup.
Juice is great.
I would say his favorite, he likes sweet drinks. He's not, unfortunately, I wish Azzurum was a black coffee in the morning kind of person. I'm a black coffee in the morning kind of person. Mm-hmm. Azzurum is like a frappuccino from Starbucks kind of person.
I see. Keep an eye out for the Azzurum sippy cups in the SOFTpod merch store soon. Very nice.
Cry.
The next question is from K2. And she asks, Azzurum's love language, ?
Azzurum's love language is definitely physical touch. Mostly because he doesn't understand a lot of other love languages. Like, a quality time and physical touch, I would say, are Azzurum's top 2 love languages. Physical touch is definitely the way that I think he would show his love. Like, that's the way that he would show his love. And the way that he likes receiving it is probably quality time. Honestly, words of affirmation might be up there too. Someone just needs to tell him he's doing a good job every once in a while.
And you're like, yeah, actually, you know what, gifts as well. Like,
yeah, like, actually, no, I'd say receiving gifts are pretty low because he didn't, like, when he was a kid, he didn't get a lot of gifts, but like, it wasn't like I'm so sad I don't have toys. He just never really like thought of gifts as that deep. Mm-hmm. What's the other one? Acts of service.
Acts of service.
Let me think about this. I'm gonna take the love language quiz for Az. I should have done that in preparation. I would say Azzurum shows in physical touch, quality time. Azzurum likes receiving, quality time, and physical touch, I think. I want to say acts of service. I would say words of affirmation is below acts of service. Sorry, I'm thinking really deeply into this.
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Just because I'm trying to think, like, I think a lot of the times that Azzurum felt really like grateful for DeVille is when he did something for him. Whenever he like went out of his way to, like, in one of the first scenes with Azzurum and DeVille together, DeVille like got him breakfast. That like act of service of like going out of his way to do something to make Azzurum stay a little bit easier. But I wouldn't say that's his top one. I would say that it would probably be between quality time and physical touch.
That makes sense. Understood. We'll take the quiz and then we'll post the results on the Patreon at some point.
My 30-minute answer.
Yeah. Dan asked a question that kind of touches a little bit on a question we talked about before, which is where Azzurum started. There's a lot of people who are asking, like, how is Azzurum different from when we first started and to where they are now? And we answered it a little bit. Is there a specific moment, though, that you were like, actually, I want Azzurum to play more like cheerful himbo rather than, brooding or like serious?
Yeah, I think it was, I don't remember like a distinct moment, but it was around the time that he started diving more into the role in the party where he like talks to people and he's like trying to like charm people a lot, I realized that him not wanting to talk to people didn't really make sense with that. And so I was like, no, I think he would probably actually enjoy talking to people. I think he actually would be pretty outgoing. And that's kind of when the switch happened, which was pretty early on. And then it just kind of like got more and more out of control as the show went on. He just became more and more extroverted every session.
Very fair. That makes sense. This next question's one that will be very fun, which is from Signet. The question is, if you were to pick 3 to 4 other fictional characters to summarize Azzy with, who would they be and why? Now, if you could please give me your thesis statement and your essay before the test time is over, that would be appreciated.
Oh, okay. So let me content warning this with they're all gonna be anime characters because I'm predictable. And so I recently, every time I've been watching an anime recently, and I've been rewatching a lot of shows with Michelle as she's getting more into anime, and we'll start watching something and I'll be like, oh shit, that's just Azzurum. It's happened like 3 times where we'll be watching something and I'm like, oh, this is just Azzurum. So Azzurum has, but the good thing is there's not like one character that I'm like, this person is a carbon copy of Azzurum. But there are a lot of like plots that I did take and I subconsciously just took and didn't realize. And I don't feel bad about it because I fucking love them. So
you shouldn't feel bad about it. Yeah, the execution's perfect. And
so I would say that Azzurum's motivation in life and angsty side aligns a lot with Sasuke Uchiha. Everyone acts shocked. Azzurum's childhood and his trauma with his dad aligns a lot with Ren, the main character of Blue Exorcist.
Oh, all right.
If you just watch like the first 2-3 episodes of Blue Exorcist, you'll get it. And then Azzurum's motivation as in his everyday personality, and this is one that I didn't copy because I didn't consume this before I created Azzurum, but I was thinking about it and I was like, who would the third character be? And I think that his outlook on life and his goals actually align a lot with Itadori Yuji from Jujutsu Kaisen. Just because they're both a little himbo-y. They both are kind of like self-sacrificing. They both care a lot about the people they love, and that's just like what Yuji's whole thing is, and that is also what Azzurum's whole thing is. Other than that, he's kind of like Inuyasha sometimes.
Just chilling out.
He's just like kind of like annoying, like Inuyasha.
Good answers. I mean, good answers all across the board. There you have it. Azzurum is the only character in the Strings of Fate based entirely off of anime. Just kidding. No, I love Azzurum.
Just kidding, but I'm not.
I definitely see the Yuji thing. Yeah, Itadori is a very good comparison.
Yeah, Ren from Blue Exorcist, I'd say their personalities are also pretty similar, except Ren's a little angrier. Azzurum's personality is not like Sasuke Uchiha. I just want to go ahead and put that out there.
Thank God.
He just has, there are a lot of parallels between Sasuke's story and motivations and Azzurum's story and motivations. One of my best friends, who one of our biggest things we bond over is the fact that we both watch Naruto. I remember texting him one day and being like, this is my character from D&D, and giving him like a quick backstory. And he texted me back and he was like, you do realize that your D&D character is just Sasuke Uchiha, right? Like you just... And I think it was around the time that Azzurum like went through the trials, and he was like, that is just Sasuke leaving the village. That was the content warning of Naruto spoilers in this episode.
There you go. If you haven't watched Naruto yet, and you, like me, and you didn't know that, then there you go.
Spoiled all of Naruto.
Spoiled all of Naruto for me. I can't believe he leaves. No, awesome. That will kind of, there's a small lead in here to the next question, which is, now that you know the characters that Azzurum was born from, Now, Acute wants to know, in order to portray, and also this is one that will be very helpful for you in your career as a consumer of softpod fan fiction. If she wanted to portray Azzurum more accurately in her fan fictions, what are 1 to 3 things to keep in mind when writing him?
Azzurum is not very intelligent book-wise. There's a whole discussion in the Discord the other day. If you're not a part of our Discord, you should join our Discord. But there's a whole discussion on our Discord the other day of, is Azzurum dumb? And what the softies and I kind of came to the conclusion of is he's street smart, book smart, not at all. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's something to keep in mind because it can get kind of confusing. But like Azzurum doesn't know big words. He wouldn't know like a lot of like complex concepts. He went through a basic education. Other things to keep in mind, he is actually like, he has a big heart, I'd say, so he does have like a lot of soft sides, and especially for like things that are cute or like animals and stuff like that. And so he's not like this cold, hard exterior. I don't know, that's all I can think of. I don't know. Very bad at describing things.
No problem. It's no problem. Yeah, I definitely agree. Azzurum is not dumb. Azzurum is a very good common sense and a very good at reading situations and making quick decisions. But academia-wise, Azurum's not very versed. Kind of the opposite of Renaer, where Renaer is like, yes, I've read a lot of books on these situations, and I have been in like textbook situations, but in confronted with like a common sense problem, will freeze up, etc.
Sounds about right.
Katie asks, what is Azzurum's deal?
I have been wondering the same fucking thing. What is that kid's deal?
Fucking deal?
What is his I don't know. What is his deal?
That's like, a good question, right?
It's like, there are so many things to ask. Like, why does Azzurum not know how to talk about his feelings? Why does Azzurum constantly put himself in the middle of dangerous situations? Why does Azzurum like fucking annoy the hell out of his friends? So what is his deal? I don't know. Once we put Azzurum through some fantasy therapy, I will let you know what his deal is.
I think the next arc is gonna just be a good old trip to the fantasy therapist, which will be good. It'll be good. It'll be nice. Just for everyone to decompress. This person, I think, already asked a question. Issa already asked this question. I actually need to, this is off the record for a second, so I'll ask it afterwards, but it's about how old Azzurum was when he was taken by Elliot, and if you remember that moment, because I was leaning towards...
No.
You didn't know?
He's an infant, like right after he was born. I don't like that look.
Blink, blink. Anyways, so hold that in mind.
Azzurum didn't even really know that Elliot wasn't his dad until somebody was like, "That's definitely not your dad." He's like, "What are you talking about?" He didn't understand how babies were born.
He did not understand. This question is from Lauren, who asks, "What does Azzy like most about his friends?" And it's spelled friends.
About his friends?
And Deville, of course.
Like, I have to go through each of them and like name like 1 to 2 positive qualities. It's like a friendship test.
Full sentences. And we're gonna ask Ladara and see if those answers match up. If you're correct. No, just it could be a general statement. It could be specific. It doesn't have to be an essay on what Azzurum loves about his friends.
Azzurum what he likes about loves about Ladara is she's the only other person in the party that I think is just as willing as him to just pull the trigger and do something. If they're in a situation, he's like, no, I think we should just do this. Ladara is the most likely to be like, all right, pull out the bows and arrow.
Yeah, let's kill.
Especially if it's something like I think that if Vincent wasn't there, they probably would plan a little less. Ladara and Azzurum are both pretty confident in their abilities, and I think Vincent isn't as confident in his abilities. So those two would be, that's what I think he likes most about Ladara. Mm-hmm. What he likes most about Vincent is that Vincent is competent in like, it's like not necessarily like the ability, but the fact that Vincent can also disguise himself, like, is so fun for Azzurum. That's like one of his favorite things to do with Vincent, is to go trick people. And the fact that Vincent like plays along with that, I would say he really likes that Vincent is like able to get out of his shell in that way. I'm trying to think if there's anything like not power related that he likes about them.
You know, talk to them.
He's like, I like that Vincent bitches at Azzurum 24/7. I like that Vincent's probably the only one who tells Azzurum to take a shower sometimes.
Reminds Azzurum.
He thinks Vincent's pretty talented.
He is very talented.
Yeah.
You're correct.
He thinks Ladar's pretty talented too. He wouldn't stay around them if he thought they were like incompetent or something. Renee's pretty cool.
Renee's chilling. Renee's very cool.
He likes that Renee can take care of himself. Like, he doesn't have a strong relationship with Renee. It's developing on camera, as we can see. They've become, bestie bonding and everything. But at the end of the day, he's like, at least that motherfucker can take care of himself, because I am not pulling him out of the gutter. Mm-hmm. He's like, I already got to make sure Ladar doesn't go down.
Very fair, very fair. Lisa asks more towards the actual warlock part, which, by the way, spoilers from warlock again. What do you think about your warlock pact? Do you think it could go south? Do you think, or do you not really care to know a lot about like what it actually entails? Are you just like, oh, you giving me powers? Cool.
Yeah, literally. That's how Azzurum viewed the whole situation.
Nice.
He didn't really even understand what a patron was, or that he had any sort of responsibility, until they one day come knocking on his door. And by knocking on his door, I mean talking to him in his sleep. Mm-hmm. But basically the first time that he had contact with anyone in his patron and patron community is whenever he was like, oh shit, yeah. But I don't even think he understands the concept of warlocks really, or the idea that it could go south. Mm-hmm. And he's just along for the ride. Did not think about the consequences for that one, even a little bit.
And then leading into this next question, which is from Chris of the Strings of Fate podcast.
No way, I love them.
They ask you, is there any reason that Azzurum would ever want out of his pact?
If it was causing him to make decisions, like if he ever got like a contract or anything on his friends, or something that he really didn't fuck with, like if he was like got a contract to like slaughter a whole village or something, he probably would want out of his pact.
These are the last few questions, and so if you haven't heard your question, it's because we either have answered it before in another soft talk, or we mostly wanted to get to as many people as we could. And then I've kind of collected here that at the bottom there's like a good amount of spoiler questions. So the rest of this episode up until, I guess, this last question, the very last question, is going to contain some soft pod spoilers up to the latest episode, which is episode 26. Because this first question here is from Signet again, who asks how you're holding up with the whole eyeball thing.
How I, Kayla, am holding up, or how Azzurum's holding up?
Let's do both.
Because honestly, it's terrifying.
It's real scary.
I did not realize how much the whole eyeball thing creeped me out until I saw all the beautiful, wonderful fan art of it that I genuinely can only look at about once. Michelle was like, oh, Michaela, somebody drew Azzurum. And I was like, oh, cool. And then she was like, it's with the eyes, though. And I was like...
It unlocked a new fear in yourself. Genuinely sorry. That is not something I expected to come from that.
I was like, but it's really cool, and I don't mind. It's cool. And I love the art. Please keep drawing it. But please. If I only look at it once, please don't be mad at me.
And Azzurum, how's Azzurum feeling now?
About the same.
About the same.
Though honestly, Azzurum can't see it.
Yeah,
so
he can't
he's
see
like,
it, can't feel
that's
it.
really fucking weird, but he doesn't realize, like, Azzurum thinks it looks cute, apparently. He thinks it has pretty little hazel eyes.
It's pretty little hazel eyes with nice
then,
long curled eyelashes.
And then Vincent's a little jealous.
Yeah, and Vincent's like, damn, this is kind of cute. I wish I had some eye arms.
He doesn't like the idea that someone's been watching him, but he's not necessarily grossed out by it because he can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. He just kind of feels like someone's watching him at all times.
Okay. Pushing onward, there's a figure that you all have been hearing about since before the podcast that you actually finally got to meet in the podcast. This mysterious air genasi. The first time you ever heard about them, to give some context, was way back in like 2019, I would say even just 2019, yeah. You were traveling north and there was a town that kind of been torn apart because you discovered that these two people had started a fight with this guy that had come into town and kind of harassed him a little bit, and then he kind of beat the shit out of them and destroyed their town. And so starting from there to now discovering that this air genasi has a name. His name is, spoilers, Auda, and that he has a connection to you somehow. I mean, what has that been like for Azzurum? Like, let's just do first to now. The perception of this character.
I would say that Azzurum, and you can hear this if you listen. I was listening back to like episode like I want to say like 12 or so, somewhere around there. It's the episode that opens with Vincent and Azzurum in the noodle shop and Ladara in church prison. Azzurum originally viewed Auda as a horrible person, a murderer, not a great guy at all, didn't know anything about him, thought that it was his dad until he saw him in Siniath. So like all the mentions before, Azzurum was always like, is that my dad?
Is that my whole father?
Because they'd be like, oh, there was a storm, or it looked like a fucking storm toward the city, or oh, we kept hearing about like these things happening outside of the city, or in cities that we walk through, and Azzurum was like, I hope that's not my dad. And it wasn't. It was his brother Rio. And when he met him in Siniath, he was like, aw shit, I'm gonna have to kill this motherfucker. But he didn't like him. He didn't like him at first. What does he think of him now? He likes him. This is his brother. His little brother is all he left.
Just a fun little guy.
No, but I was thinking about it because I was thinking about like how much Azzurum trusts Auda now versus like when I re-listened to a scene back from like episode like 11 or 12 or something, wherein he was screaming in the noodle shop about how like Adela's like harboring a murderer, and I was like, wow, he really switched his opinion on that one. And it's because Auda protected the family, and because Azzurum can tell that Auda is definitely going through some sort of identity crisis right now, and that if Auda wanted to kill him, he would have done it already. So, but I think that he really cares for him. He really wants to develop a relationship with him, and he feels really bad for him because though they were both raised like without each other as siblings, like Auda was raised, it seems to be like in a home of hatred, and at least Azzurum had like a semi-loving home growing up, you know? And so he kind of just wants to give some of that comfort to Auda.
Kind of talking about figuring out this sort of familial connection. I mean, what does Azzurum think of this kind of family aspect that's been brought into it? I mean, not just with Auda, but also like the Genasi family in the Undercity, like their like familial connection to you in more of like a caring sense, but then also for a certain member in a literal sense. How does Azzurum feel about that sort of new family he's run across after being, without one for so long, at least without one like that?
Azzurum never knew of his blood related family. Like not only did he not know them, he didn't know anything about them. He didn't really have like a strong connection to anyone he was blood related with. And so for his early childhood, he didn't think much about it. And then when people started pointing it out, he started thinking about it. And then it like had some sort of like a divide of like, this person's not blood related to me. All the people he considered family or really close friends, they weren't blood related. But because he never knew what that kind of connection would be, he didn't really care that much. So he kind of is able to accept his friends and his party members as like a family in a sense a lot easier, because he never really understood what the blood relationship was like. And now he kind of does. And that is why I think that he got so emotional, because it was like the first time in his whole life, basically, besides the time that brief moment that he had met his biological father. It's like the first time in his whole life that he had family actually related to him. And so it was like this strong sense of like himself and them and wanting to like have a connection with him, because he just wanted to see what it was about, what it was like. So I would say that's kind of, Azzurum likes the idea of family, but never really had like that family atmosphere. But also Azzurum is always scared of getting people in danger. So I also, on the flip side, he probably wants to keep his circle kind of small. But now we're testing the limits. We got a whole Genasi family that he's definitely considers his family.
And I think a good question to sort of end out on the topic of families, what does Azzurum feel about this sort of concept of a family? Does blood or found family hold greater importance? Like, is it more about the bonds you forge or the ones you're born with? And any hot takes in terms of Azzurum's take on his family?
I think that Azzurum definitely values more the bonds that are formed, because even the people that he has met in the podcast that are related to him or are related to people who are related to him, the relationship that he has with them is more because of the care that they have given him and less because they're related to him. Mm-hmm. You know, because Azzurum started kind of putting two and two together, that this mysterious air genasi, later to be revealed as Auda, might be his brother, but it didn't make him not want to find him and deal with him. So I think that he definitely is more on the found family and more about the relationship rather than the blood. That's Azzurum's hot take on family, I guess. That's his. He doesn't think much about it. He doesn't really understand the concept of a family.
Said, you know what? This is cool. And also, hate my dad.
I hate my dad.
Let's get him, you know? Hey, thank you for answering all those questions. Thank you for talking with me about Azzurum. It's been a really great time.
Thank you for asking me questions, and thanks for talking to me about Azzurum. I love that dude.
Hey, I love that dude. He's doing great things, always.
And then sometimes not great things.
And then sometimes not great things, but it's okay. It happens. Everyone's done some not great things in our campaign.
Yeah, you gen some, you joe some.
You know, we're actually about to jump into recording something now. So, you know, when this comes out, we'll see if it's still relevant. I'm just kidding.
What?
Anyways, thanks for joining. Thank you for tuning into SOFTalk, the only podcast on the internet that talks about Dungeons and Dragons, probably. Anyways, goodbye.
Bye.